The traveling trunk lay shattered across the frozen rocks, letters scattered like dead leaves in the wind. Emmett Rourke found her 10 feet below, wedged between boulders, her dress torn and blood crusting her temple. She wasn't moving. Before we dive into the story, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. Also, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more incredible stories tomorrow. Now, let's continue with the story. Emmett lowered himself carefully, boots skidding on ice-slick stone as he climbed into the ravine. The woman lay crumpled against the rocks, her face pale as death, lips tinged blue. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat. A pulse. Faint, but present. He glanced up at the ravine's edge. 20 feet of sheer drop. No one fell that distance by accident. He lifted her, startled by how little she weighed. Her right arm dangled at a wrong angle. Broken. Her traveling dress was fine cloth, Boston quality by the look of it. A mail-order bride. Luther Madsen had been boasting for weeks about a woman arriving from back east. The stagecoach had rolled through Prospect Wells 2 hours earlier, without a passenger. The wind bit through his coat as he carried her toward his horse. She stirred once, her eyes fluttering open. They were grey, intelligent even through the pain. "Please," she whispered. "Don't take me there." Then she was unconscious again. Emmett's line shack sat 3 miles north, tucked in a hollow where the wind couldn't reach. He kicked the door open and laid her on his bunk. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. He'd seen men die from cold before. She didn't have much time. He built up the fire until the small room blazed with heat, then stripped off her wet clothes with clinical efficiency. The scars surprised him. Smallpox looked like years old. They traced across her shoulders and down her back in pale ridges. He wrapped her in his spare blankets and set her broken arm as gently as he could. She cried out but didn't wake. While water heated, he examined what he'd salvaged from the ravine. 3 letters, all addressed to Luther Madsen. The handwriting was educated, careful. He shouldn't read them, but he did anyway. "I must be honest about my appearance," one read. "I survived smallpox at 16. The scarring is extensive across my face and body. If this changes your mind, I understand." Luther's reply was tucked inside. "Your appearance matters not. I need a wife. You need a home. We'll suit each other fine." Emmett looked at the woman in his bunk. Luther had lied, of course. He needed a wife the way a man needs a workhorse, to use and break. The woman's eyes opened again as he pressed a cup of warm broth to her lips. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse. "Safe," Emmett said. "For now." She studied his face, taking in his own scars, the burn tissue that twisted the left side of his jaw. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or relief at seeing someone else the world had marked. "The stage driver," she said slowly. "He saw my face in the daylight. Said Luther Madsen wouldn't want damaged goods. He threw my trunk out and told me to walk back to Prospect Wells." She closed her eyes. "I tried. I fell." Emmett had worked for Luther 5 years. He knew exactly what kind of man Luther was, and he knew what happened to women who disappointed him. "Luther thinks you never arrived," he said. "Stage came through empty. He's expecting answers from the agency back east, but that'll take weeks." He paused. "You've got time to heal before you have to decide anything." Decide what? Whether to honor a contract with the devil or run. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire crackled. And Emmett Rourke realized he'd just lied to the most dangerous man in Wyoming territory. Cora woke to the smell of coffee and the soft creak of floorboards beneath careful steps. When she tried to sit, pain lanced through her right arm. "Easy." The man appeared beside her, scarred face close now as he steadied her shoulder. "Your arm's broken. I set it as best I could. You need to stay still." Memory surged back. The stagecoach driver's look of disgust, the long walk through biting wind, the ravine edge appearing too suddenly beneath her feet. "How long have I been here?" "2 days. You had a fever the first night." He handed her a cup. "I'm Emmett Rourke. I work for Luther Madsen." Her hand shook, nearly spilling the coffee. "Then you're taking me to him?" "That's what I should do." Emmett sat in the room's only chair, expression unreadable. "But Luther rode into town yesterday asking questions. I told him the stage passed through without you, said I'd wire the agency in Cheyenne." She stared. "Why would you lie for me?" "Because I've seen what Luther does to wives." His eyes held hers. 3 women in 10 years. All dead. Horse falls, kitchen fires, a rattlesnake in the wrong place. Accidents, according to the law. Cora swallowed hard. She'd been so desperate to escape Boston, to flee her brother-in-law Harold, who'd seized control after her sister died. The advertisement had felt like salvation. Luther's letters had been kind, practical. He'd written that her scars didn't matter, that the frontier needed strong women, not pretty ones. "He knew what I looked like," she said quietly. "I was honest in my letters about the smallpox. He said he understood." "Luther says whatever serves him." Emmett stood and moved to the window. "Problem is, he paid for your passage. That's a contract in territorial law. You don't show up, he can file theft charges against the agency. They'll investigate, find out you survived. Then you're legally obligated to honor the agreement or face criminal prosecution." "So I have no choice." "I didn't say that." He turned to face her. "You've got maybe a week before the agency responds to my wire. After that, Luther will know you're alive somewhere between here and Boston. He'll come looking." Cora thought of Harold's house, the way he'd locked her in her sister's old room, controlling her inheritance by controlling her movements. She'd chosen marriage to a stranger over that prison. But this was another cage with different bars. "What are you suggesting?" "Heal first. Get your strength back. Then we figure out your options." Emmett's expression was carefully neutral. "Could be you decide to honor the contract. Could be you run. Either way, you should choose with a clear head and a working arm. And if Luther comes here before then I tell him the truth, that I found you half dead and brought you here to recover. He'll be angry I didn't report it immediately, but he can't fault me for saving his bride's life." He paused. "Can he?" The question hung in the air between them. They both knew the answer. Luther Madsen could fault anyone for anything, if it suited him. Cora looked at this stranger who'd risked his livelihood to give her time. His scars were worse than hers, the burn tissue pulling at his jaw and neck. Someone had hurt him badly once. Maybe that's why he understood. "Thank you," she said. Emmett nodded once and turned back to the window. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the mountains. Inside the small shack, 2 damaged people sat in silence, both wondering how long mercy could hold against the weight of a powerful man's expectations. The coffee grew cold in Cora's hands as she realized that Emmett Rourke had just made himself her accomplice, and neither of them knew yet what that would cost. By the 5th day, she could stand without dizziness. Her arm still throbbed inside its splint, but the pain had dulled to something bearable. She insisted on helping anyway, washing dishes one-handed, folding blankets, anything to feel useful. "You read much?" Emmett asked one evening, nodding toward the battered book on his shelf. "Everything I could find." She settled into the chair he'd pulled near the fire. My father taught literature at a women's college before he died. He believed educated daughters were a gift, not a threat. Not many men think that way. No. She watched the flames twist and snap. After he died, my sister Margaret married Harold Finch, banker's son, respectable. The word curdled. When Margaret caught pneumonia 2 years ago, Harold learned our inheritance had been left equally to both daughters. He became my legal guardian until I married or turned 30. Emmett poured coffee, listening. He moved me into their house. Said it was proper, that I needed protection. Then he locked the inheritance accounts. Said a scarred woman with no prospects couldn't be trusted with money. Cora's voice stayed steady, but her hand tightened on the cup. I had 3 years until 30. 3 years of him controlling every penny, every movement. The marriage agencies were my only way out. So you traded one prison for another? I thought I was trading for freedom. She met his eyes. Luther's letters made it sound like partnership. He wrote about needing someone capable, not decorative, someone who wouldn't faint at hard work or harsh winters. Luther's good with words when he wants something. What about you? Cora asked. How does a man end up working for someone like him? Emmett was quiet for a long moment. 5 years ago, I was foreman at a ranch in Colorado. Good job, good pay. One night the barn caught fire with horses inside. I got them out, but a beam came down. He touched his scarred jaw. Spent 4 months healing. By the time I could work again, owner had replaced me. Said guests didn't want to look at my face across the dinner table. That's cruel. That's business. He shrugged. I drifted north, heard Luther needed a foreman who knew cattle and didn't mind isolation. He didn't care what I looked like as long as I worked. Been here since. But you know what he is. Knowing and having choices are different things. Emmett stood and moved to the window, his usual spot when conversations grew uncomfortable. Man with a face like mine doesn't get many job offers. Cora understood that kind of mathematics. The world sorted people into useful and decorative, and both of them had been marked as neither. The wire from Cheyenne could come any day. Emmett said, You should start thinking about what you want to do. Run where? Harold's lawyers will find me, and Luther paid for my passage. I'm legally bound to him, or criminally liable to the agency. She set down her coffee with more force than intended. I wrote those letters believing a man who claimed my scars didn't matter. I was fool enough to trust words on paper. You weren't a fool. You were desperate. Emmett turned from the window. We both know what that feels like. The fire popped loudly in the silence. Outside, an owl called through the darkness. Cora realized that in 5 days she'd grown used to this small shack, to Emmett's quiet competence, to conversations that didn't require her to pretend gratitude for being tolerated. If I run, he'll come after you, she said. I've survived worse than Luther's anger. Have you? She looked at him steadily. Because it seems to me you've been surviving at his mercy for 5 years. How much worse can he make your life? Emmett didn't answer. They both knew the truth. In Luther's world, there were always ways to make things worse. The answer came on the 6th morning. Emmett returned from Prospect Wells with supplies and a telegram clenched in his fist. One look at his face told her everything. The agency confirmed you boarded the stage in Cheyenne. Driver says you got off at a way station, claimed you'd changed your mind. He set the telegram on the table. They're washing their hands of it. Luther's contract still stands. If you don't, report. It's abandonment. She read the message twice. The words didn't change. So, I'm a criminal if I run. The law's muddy, but Luther won't care about muddy. Emmett sat heavily. There's more you need to know. About those wives. You said they died in accidents. That's what the records say. But I was here for the last one. Rebecca. She lasted 8 months. His jaw tightened. She tried to leave. Luther caught her at the Laramie station, dragged her back. 2 weeks later, she fell down the cellar stairs and broke her neck. The room closed in. You think he killed her? I know he did. I saw the bruises on her arms, saw the fear in her eyes. His voice dropped. I didn't help her. Told myself it wasn't my business. I've regretted that every day since. Cora stood and walked to the window, her splintered arm held close to her chest. The mountains looked peaceful in morning light. Deceptive, like everything else out here. Why tell me this now? Because you can still travel. Your arm's healing clean. I can get you to the rail station in Laramie, give you enough money to reach California or Oregon. Start over where neither Luther nor your brother-in-law can find you. With a broken arm and no references? No legal identity if I'm running from a contract? She turned to face him. I'd last a month before I was arrested, or worse. Maybe. But you'd be alive. The words hung between them. Alive, but hunted. Alive, but always looking over her shoulder. Cora had lived that way in Harold's house for 2 years, jumping at footsteps, flinching at raised voices. She'd chosen the frontier to escape that fear. There has to be another way. Emmett was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measuring each word. There is one option. It's not ideal, but it's legal. Tell me. If you married someone else, Luther's contract becomes void. Territorial law says a woman's marriage obligations supersede prior arrangements. You'd be another man's wife, not his property. Cora stared at him. Who would marry a scarred woman they don't know to spite Luther Madsen? That's suicide. Maybe not spite, maybe just doing what's right. Emmett stood and moved to the stove, pouring coffee he didn't drink. The preacher in Prospect Wells is an old friend, Reverend Abernathy. He'd perform the ceremony, make it legal. Understanding dawned slowly. You're suggesting you marry me. I'm suggesting it's an option. His back stayed turned. We could get it done quick, before Luther knows you're here. Then you'd be legally free of him. After things settle, you could annul it and go wherever you want. And what happens to you when Luther finds out? I'll deal with that. He'll kill you. Maybe. Emmett finally turned to face her. But I let Rebecca die because I was too scared to act. I won't do that again. Cora looked at this scarred stranger who'd saved her life twice now. Once from the Kisosipan ravine, and once from her own desperation. The proposal was insane. It would make them both targets. But it was also the only plan that didn't require her to run or submit. I need to think, she said. You've got until sunset. After that, Luther's going to start asking why I haven't brought you in. Emmett picked up his hat. I'll be checking the fence line. When I get back, tell me what you've decided. He left her alone in the shack with impossible choices and the sound of his horse fading into distance. Cora had made her decision by noon. She was practicing the words when hoofbeats shattered the silence. 3 riders. She recognized Luther Madsen instantly. Tall, handsome, immaculate even out here. The men beside him wore their guns low and easy. There was nowhere to hide. Luther dismounted and knocked once before pushing the door open. Miss Brennan. His smile was warm, rehearsed. Thank God you're alive. When the agency said you vanished, I feared the worst. She stood, keeping the table between them. Mr. Madsen. Please, call me Luther. His gaze flicked to her splintered arm, the borrowed clothes. I'm sorry for these crude arrangements. Emmett should have brought you to the main house at once. I can't imagine what you've endured. He saved my life. Yes. And I'm grateful. A subtle edge crept into Luther's voice. Though I do wonder why he failed to inform me sooner. Proper care could have been provided days ago. I asked him not to tell you, Cora said evenly. I needed time to recover. Luther's smile didn't waver, but something shifted behind his eyes. I see. And are you recovered now? Before she could answer, Emmett's horse appeared through the window. He dismounted quickly, taking in the scene. Luther turned to face him. Emmett, I'm disappointed. You know how worried I've been. She had fever and a broken arm. Didn't seem right to move her. Emmett's voice was carefully neutral. And the telegraph? You told me she never arrived. I said the stage came through without her. That was true when I sent it. The distinction was thin as paper. Luther heard it. His pleasant expression cooled by degrees. I see we have a misunderstanding about loyalty. He turned back to Cora, the smile returning. Miss Brennan, I have a carriage waiting. Let me take you to my home. You'll have proper medical care, comfortable rooms, time to adjust before we discuss our arrangement. I appreciate the offer, but I'm healing well here. I insist. The warmth in Luther's voice had vanished. I've invested considerably in bringing you here. Passage from Boston, agency fees, legal contracts. Surely you understand I have certain expectations. Cora felt Emmett tense beside her. I understand the contract, Mr. Madsen, but I'm not cattle to be collected when convenient. Luther's jaw tightened. You're a woman who accepted payment for a specific purpose. The law is quite clear on breach of contract. The law is also clear on fraud. Your letters claimed my appearance didn't matter. The stage driver who abandoned me suggested otherwise. I have no control over the prejudices of common laborers. Luther stepped closer to the table. But I am a man of my word. I will honor our agreement fully. The question is whether you will honor yours. I need more time to consider. You've had a week. Luther's hand rested on the table edge, close to hers. I'm a patient man, Miss Brennan, but my patience has limits. You'll come with me today, or I'll have the territorial marshal pursue charges of theft and fraud against both you and the agency. Emmett moved then, placing himself between them. She's injured and scared. Give her another day. Luther looked at Emmett for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft and deadly. You're fired. Collect your wages from the bunkhouse and be off my land by sunset. If I find you here after dark, my men will remove you. He turned back to Cora. As for you, I'll return tomorrow morning with a wagon. Be ready to leave, or I'll have the marshal waiting instead. He picked up his hat and moved toward the door, then paused. I paid good money for a wife. I intend to have one. Whether she comes willingly or in chains is entirely up to her. The door closed behind him. Through the window, Cora watched the three riders disappear toward the main ranch. Her hands were shaking. We have until morning, Emmett said quietly. He'll kill us both. Probably. Emmett pulled his saddle from the wall. But if we ride now, we can reach Prospect Wells by midnight. Reverend Abernathy will marry us even at that hour if I explain. By dawn, you'll be my wife, not Luther's property. Cora looked at him. And then? Then we face whatever comes together. They had 2 hours before Luther's men would start watching the trails. Emmett saddled both horses while Cora gathered what little she owned. Her ruined traveling dress. The 3 letters. Nothing else had survived the ravine. Wear these. Emmett handed her a pair of his old trousers and a heavy coat. You can't ride in skirts, and it's going to be cold. Cora changed quickly, ignoring the impropriety. Survival didn't care about modesty. The trousers were too large, but a belt cinched them tight. The coat smelled like wood smoke and leather. Luther will send men after us? she said, emerging from behind the blanket he'd hung for privacy. I know. That's why we're not taking the main trail. Emmett spread a rough map across the table. There's an old mining road through Hollow Creek Canyon. Nobody uses it anymore because it's dangerous as hell, but it cuts the distance by half. We can reach Prospect Wells by dawn if we push hard. And if Luther's men know about this road, then we'll have problems. He folded the map and tucked it inside his coat. But staying here guarantees problems. At least this way we're moving. Cora looked around the small shack that had been her sanctuary for 6 days. You're giving up everything for this. Your job, your home. I gave those up the moment I lied to Luther. Emmett checked his rifle, his movements efficient. Been living on borrowed time since. Why? The question came out raw. You don't know me. We're strangers. Emmett was quiet for a moment, his scarred hand steady on the rifle. After Rebecca died, I swore I'd never stand by and watch Luther destroy another woman. Swore it to myself and to God. He met her eyes. Man breaks that kind of promise. He's got nothing left worth keeping. A horse whinnied in the distance. They both froze. Could be nothing, Emmett said, but he was already moving toward the window. 4 riders approached from the direction of the main ranch. Not Luther's men. These rode harder, faster, hunting. They're early. Emmett grabbed both sets of saddlebags. We leave now, back door. Cora's heart hammered as she followed him out. The horses were tied behind the shack, hidden from the approaching riders. Emmett helped her mount despite her splintered arm, then swung onto his own horse. Stay close and stay quiet. If we get separated, keep riding north. The canyon entrance is marked by 2 dead pines. The riders were close enough now that Cora could hear their voices. One shouted something about checking the shack. Another laughed. They weren't being subtle. They didn't need to be. Emmett led them into the trees at a walk, letting the forest swallow their shapes. Only when they were 50 yards deep did he urge his horse to a trot. Cora followed, her broken arm throbbing with each jolt. Behind them, a door slammed open. Men's voices rose in anger, discovering the empty shack. They'll track us, Cora whispered. Not if we reach the canyon first. Ground's too rocky there. Emmett pushed his horse faster. Can you ride harder? Her arm screamed protest, but Cora nodded. They broke into a gallop just as shouts erupted behind them. The hunt had begun. The trees blurred past. Cora bent low over her horse's neck, trusting the animal to find footing in the dimming light. Emmett rode ahead, his scarred profile grim with concentration. Gunfire cracked through the air. A warning shot, wild and high. They want us alive, Emmett called back. Luther needs you breathing to make the marriage legal. That gives us an advantage. What advantage? They're gaining. They think we'll run scared. We're not running. He veered sharply left, toward a steep ridge. We're leading them somewhere they won't want to follow. The canyon entrance appeared ahead, 2 skeletal pines stark against the darkening sky. Beyond them, the ground dropped away into shadow. Cora's horse balked at the edge. Trust me, Emmett said, and plunged into the darkness. Cora kicked her horse forward and followed him down. The canyon walls rose steep on both sides, turning twilight into near darkness. Cora's horse stumbled on loose rock, recovered, stumbled again. Her arm blazed with pain every time she gripped the reins. How much further? She gasped. 2 miles to the Narrows. Then we're on foot. Emmett's voice echoed off stone. After that, they can't follow with horses. Gunfire exploded behind them. Closer this time. A bullet ricocheted off rock face, spraying fragments. Luther's men had entered the canyon. They're shooting to wound now, Emmett said grimly. Trying to drop the horses. The path narrowed, forcing them to single file. Cora's horse scraped against canyon wall, nearly throwing her. She held on with her good hand, her vision swimming with pain. More shots. One struck rock inches from her head. "Down!" Emmett wheeled his horse, rifle already raised. He fired twice into the canyon behind them. A man screamed. The pursuers' horses scattered, buying them seconds in turns. "Go!" Emmett shouted, and Cora kicked her horse forward. The narrows appeared ahead, barely wide enough for a man on foot. Emmett dismounted, running, yanking supplies from his saddlebags. Cora slid off her horse, nearly collapsing when her boots hit ground. "Leave the horses," Emmett said, already moving. "They'll find their way out." He slapped both animals hard on the hindquarters. They bolted deeper into the canyon, their hoofbeats fading. Smart. Luther's men would follow the sound, buying them time. Emmett pulled Cora into the narrows. The gap was so tight they had to turn sideways. Rock scraped her shoulders, her splintered arm. She bit back a cry. Behind them, horses and shouting. Luther's men had reached their abandoned position. "They went through! Can't fit horses, we go on foot." Emmett moved faster, dragging her when she stumbled. The narrows opened into a small clearing beside a creek. He dropped the supplies and positioned himself behind a boulder, rifle ready. "Stay down!" he ordered, then fired. Cora pressed herself against rock as bullets tore through the narrow gap. Emmett fired methodically, making each shot count. One of Luther's men cried out. Another cursed and retreated. "How many?" Cora called. 3, maybe 4. Emmett reloaded without looking away from the gap. "They're smart enough not to push through one at a time. So what do we do?" "Wait for dark, then climb." He gestured toward the canyon's south wall. "There's a game trail halfway up. I used it during roundup last spring." "I can barely walk. How am I supposed to climb?" "You find a way or you die here." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "Your choice." A voice echoed from the narrows. "Emmett Rourke! Luther wants the woman alive. Hand her over and you can ride out. You've got my word." "Your word's worth spit, Dutch." Emmett called back. "Then we wait you out. No food, no water. How long you think you'll last?" Emmett glanced at the saddlebags. 1 canteen, some dried beef. Not enough. Cora touched his arm. "There's another option. I'm not surrendering you." "Not surrender. Trade." She met his eyes. "I go out there, tell them I'll honor Luther's contract. They take me. Back. You're free. And Luther kills you the first time you disobey him." "Maybe. But you'd be alive." "No." Emmett turned back to the narrows. "We climb at dark. Both of us." Blood seeped through his shirt sleeve. Cora hadn't noticed before. "You're hit. Just grazed." But his face had gone pale. Another voice from the narrows, deeper. "We're coming through. 3 men, all guns. Make your choice." Cora looked at Emmett's wound, at the impossible canyon wall, at the narrow gap where 3 armed men would soon appear. They had maybe 10 minutes before full darkness. Not enough time to climb, not enough ammunition to hold them off. "There," Emmett pointed upstream. "See that ledge? Get behind it. When they come through, I'll draw their fire. You run upstream. Follow the water north. I won't leave you. You will, because if Luther catches us both, everything we did was for nothing." His jaw set. "I can hold them long enough for you to get clear." Footsteps echoed in the narrows. Careful, measured, coming closer. Cora grabbed the canteen and moved toward the ledge, her heart breaking with every step. Behind her, Emmett checked his rifle one last time. The first man emerged from the gap, gun raised. Emmett fired. Cora ran upstream, the gunfire behind her sounding like the end of the world. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but Emmett had bought her escape with his blood. She wouldn't waste it. The creek bed twisted between high rocks. She slipped on wet stones, caught herself with her broken arm, and nearly blacked out from pain. "Keep moving. Don't stop." Behind her, the shooting intensified. Then silence. Terrible, complete silence. She stopped, chest heaving, listened. Nothing. Either Emmett had won or Luther's men had. Either way, she couldn't go back. The water deepened, forcing her onto the bank. Her legs trembled. She'd lost track of time, of distance. The canyon walls seemed to close in, trapping her. A hand clamped over her mouth. Cora tried to scream, to fight, but strong arms held her still. A voice whispered in her ear, speaking English with careful precision. "Be silent. Luther's men are ahead." She froze. The hand released her mouth. She turned slowly. 5 men surrounded her. Shoshone hunters, their faces painted for tracking. The one who'd grabbed her was perhaps 40, with intelligent eyes and a scar across his cheekbone. "Please," Cora whispered. "My friend is back there. He's wounded." "The scarred white man who shoots well?" The hunter nodded. "We saw. 3 of Luther's men ran. 2 stayed to fight. Your friend lives, but barely." Relief nearly dropped her. "You have to help him." "We will. That man gave my family food during the starving winter 2 years past, asked nothing in return." He gestured to his companions. "We take you both to safety, but we must move now. Luther himself comes with more men." "How do you know?" "We've been watching Luther for many seasons. He takes what isn't his, kills what he cannot control." The hunter's expression hardened. "Today, he will not have you." 2 of the hunters moved back toward the shooting. The leader, who introduced himself as Takoda, guided Cora onto a hidden trail that climbed the canyon wall. Her legs screamed, her arm throbbed, but she climbed. 15 minutes later, they reached a narrow ledge. Below, torches appeared in the canyon. Luther's voice carried up, sharp with rage. "Find them! They couldn't have gone far!" Takoda pressed a finger to his lips. They waited, barely breathing, as Luther and 6 men searched below. So close Cora could see Luther's face twisted with fury. The other 2 hunters appeared, half carrying Emmett between them. Blood soaked his shirt, but he was conscious. His eyes found Cora's in the darkness. "Told you to run," he whispered. "And leave you to have all the fun?" She took his good hand, squeezed it. Takoda studied Emmett's wound, then nodded to his men. They lifted Emmett carefully and started moving along the ledge. Cora followed, her broken arm cradled close. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Hidden paths Luther doesn't know. By dawn we reach the other side of these mountains." Takoda glanced back at her. "Your friend says you run from marriage contract. Says you need to reach the town with the white man's church before sunset tomorrow. Prospect Wells. We need a preacher. Then we get you there." He smiled slightly. "But first, we stop the bleeding. Dead man cannot marry." They moved through darkness, following trails only the hunters knew. Behind them, Luther's torches searched in vain. Above them, stars emerged cold and distant. Emmett stumbled, caught himself. "Can't. Keep pace." "You don't have to." Takoda gestured, and his men fashioned a travois from branches and rope. "We carry you. You saved my daughter from freezing. Now I save you from bleeding." They secured Emmett to the travois and kept moving. Cora walked beside him, her hand on his shoulder. His breathing was labored but steady. "Why?" she asked Takoda as they descended into a hidden valley. "Why help us against Luther?" "Because Luther believes he owns everything. The land, the water, the people." Dakota's voice was quiet but fierce. Men like that must be stopped, or they consume everything. Your friend understands this. So do you. By midnight, they reached a sheltered cave where a small fire burned. Dakota's wife waited there with medicine and clean cloth. She went to work on Emmett's wound without a word. Cora collapsed against the cave wall, exhausted beyond measure. Tomorrow they'd reach Prospect Wells. Tomorrow she'd marry a man she barely knew to escape a man she'd never met. Tomorrow Luther would try to stop them. But tonight, they were alive. They reached the ridge overlooking Prospect Wells at 4 in the afternoon. The town spread below them, small and dusty in the late sun. The church steeple rose from the center like a promise. Emmett could ride again, though his face was gray with pain. Dakota had packed his wound with herbs and bound it tight. "This will hold until sunset," he'd said. "After that, you need real doctor." "After sunset, I'll either be married or dead," Emmett had replied. Now they sat their horses on the ridge, while Dakota scanned the town with sharp eyes. "Luther's men are already there. 6 riders. They watch the church and the main road." "How long until Luther himself arrives?" Cora asked. "He left the canyon at dawn, riding hard. Maybe 1 hour behind us." Dakota pointed to a narrow draw on the town's east side. "That path takes you to the church's back door. We go first. Make noise on Main Street. Draw Luther's men away." "You've done enough," Emmett said. "This isn't your fight. Any fight against Luther is our fight." Dakota met his eyes. "Besides, you gave us food when we starved. This is small payment." They descended in 2 groups. Dakota and his hunters rode brazenly down the main street, their presence drawing immediate attention. Luther's men moved toward them, hands on guns. In the chaos, Cora and Emmett slipped through the draw. The church's back door was unlocked. They stumbled inside, startling a woman arranging flowers. She took one look at Emmett's blood-soaked shirt and ran for help. Reverend Abernathy appeared moments later, a thin man with kind eyes. "Emmett Rourke, I heard you'd crossed Luther Madsen. Need you to marry us, Reverend, right now." Abernathy looked between them, understanding dawning. "The mail-order bride. Luther's been asking questions all week." He nodded slowly. "I'll do it. But you should know he's got half the county looking for you both." "I know." Emmett swayed, caught himself on a pew. "Just need it legal before he gets here. Can you stand for the ceremony?" "I'll crawl if I have to." Abernathy called for witnesses. 2 townspeople appeared, an older couple who'd known Emmett for years. They positioned themselves in front of the altar, and the Reverend opened his prayer book. "Dearly beloved!" The church doors slammed open. Luther Madsen stood in the entrance, 6 armed men behind him. Dust covered his expensive clothes, and his handsome face was tight with rage. "Stop this mockery immediately!" Abernathy didn't pause. "We are gathered here in the sight of God. I said stop!" Luther strode down the aisle, his hand on his pistol. "That woman is under contract to me. This ceremony is illegal." "The ceremony is lawful and binding." Abernathy's voice remained calm. "A woman's right to choose her husband supersedes any prior commercial arrangement. Territorial law is clear." "I don't care about territorial law. I paid for her. She's mine." "I'm not property," Cora said, her voice ringing through the church. "I'm a human being making a choice." Luther's mask of civility shattered completely. He drew his gun and pointed it at Emmett. "Step away from her, now, or I'll kill you where you stand." The witnesses gasped. Abernathy moved between Luther and the couple. You'll commit murder in God's house? Before witnesses? Think carefully, Luther. Murder requires a trial. I'll claim self-defense. Say he drew first." Luther's eyes were cold. "No jury will convict me." "Maybe not." The older male witness stepped forward. "Samuel Pritchard, Cora recognized him now. Town banker. But 12 people saw you threaten an unarmed injured man during a religious ceremony. Even your money can't buy away that many witnesses. More townspeople had gathered in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. Their faces were grim. Luther's reputation had preceded him, and no one liked what they saw. Luther's gun hand trembled with rage. He was cornered and knew it. Kill Emmett now, and he'd hang. Let the ceremony finish, and he'd lose everything. "This isn't over," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Legal or not, she came here on my contract. I'll see you both ruined. That's a problem for tomorrow." Abernathy turned back to Emmett and Cora. "Do you, Emmett Rourke, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife?" Emmett's eyes never left Cora's face. "I do." "And do you, Cora Brennan, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband?" She thought of Boston, of Harold's locked doors, of the ravine and the stagecoach driver's contempt, of 6 days in a line shack with a scarred stranger who'd risked everything to give her a choice. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." The sun touched the horizon outside. Luther's gun stayed pointed at Emmett's chest. But the ceremony was complete, and Cora was no longer his. Luther holstered his gun slowly, his eyes promising vengeance. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts, Rourke. You're a dead man working on borrowed time." He turned to Cora. "And you, Miss Brennan, you've made an enemy you can't afford." He walked out, his men following. Through the church windows, Cora watched them mount and ride south. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Emmett collapsed against the altar rail. The doctor rushed forward, finally able to tend him properly. Samuel Pritchard's wife offered them lodging for the night, and the townspeople formed a quiet guard around the church until Luther's dust disappeared completely. In a small room above the general store, the doctor rebandaged Emmett's wound. "You're lucky. Another inch and you'd have bled out in that canyon." He left them with laudanum and instructions to rest. Cora sat in the room's only chair, watching Emmett breathe steadily on the narrow bed. Married. They were married. The word felt strange, too large for what had actually happened between them. "You don't have to stay," Emmett said quietly, his eyes still closed. "Marriage gives you legal protection from Luther's contract, but you're not bound to me. We can get an annulment once things settle. You'll be free to go wherever you want." Cora thought about that word. Free. She'd chased it from Boston to Wyoming, trading one cage for another. But somewhere between the ravine and the church, freedom had changed meaning. It wasn't just absence of chains, it was choosing who you trusted with your scars. "And where would I go?" she asked. "Back to Boston where Harold waits? To California where I know no one and have no money?" She moved to sit on the edge of the bed. "I spent 2 years in Harold's house wishing someone would see me as a person instead of a problem. You did that. You risked your life for it. I owed a debt. Rebecca. This wasn't about Rebecca." Cora took his hand carefully, mindful of his wound. "You could have turned me over to Luther a dozen times. Saved yourself. You chose not to." Emmett opened his eyes, finally meeting her gaze. "I'm not the hero in this story, Cora. I'm a hired hand with a ruined face and no prospects. You deserve better. Better than a man who sees me as worth saving? Who doesn't flinch at my scars because he carries his own?" She smiled slightly. "I wrote letters to a stranger hoping for partnership. Maybe I just wrote to the wrong address. Luther meant what he said. He'll come after us. Then we face him together. Isn't that what marriage means? Facing things together instead of alone?" Emmett was quiet for a long moment. Then his scarred fingers tightened around hers. "I've never had anyone choose me before. Not for who I am. I never had anyone fight for me before. Not the real me. Scars and all. Cora leaned closer. Maybe we're both getting something we needed. Outside, night settled over Prospect Wells. Takoda and his hunters had melted back into the mountains with promises to watch for Luther's movements. The townspeople had offered work and protection if Emmett and Cora chose to stay. For the first time in years, neither of them faced the future alone. "We'll need a plan," Emmett said. "Luther's got money and influence. We've got nothing. We've got each other. We've got witnesses. And we've got the law on our side, even if it's thin protection." Cora squeezed his hand. "My father used to say that the strongest foundations are built by people who refuse to stay broken. Maybe that's us." "Maybe." Emmett's eyes were heavy with exhaustion and laudanum, but he smiled, a real smile that transformed his scarred face. "You're tougher than you look, Mrs. Rourke." "So are you, Mr. Rourke." He drifted into sleep, his hand still holding hers. Cora sat in the darkness, listening to his breathing, feeling the weight of the gold band Reverend Abernathy had loaned them for the ceremony. Tomorrow they'd face reality. Luther's threats, finding work, building a life from nothing. But tonight, a mail-order bride who'd never reached her destination and a cowboy who'd found her fighting for survival had both discovered something unexpected. Not rescue, not salvation, something simpler and infinitely more valuable. They'd found each other, and sometimes, in the harsh territory of the human heart, that was enough. If this story moved you, click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow we'll share another powerful tale of courage, redemption, and the unexpected bonds that transform broken lives into something beautiful. Until then, may you find the strength to fight for what matters, and may someone fight for you in return.